Okay. For those of you who are here for the first time, my name is David Homer, and I have been in the practice of naturopathic medicine for 25 years. I retired from clinical practice 5 years ago, and I'm still very much involved in the health and wellness arena from a different perspective. I teach mostly remotely, um, a lifestyle concept. It's called whole living. And it's really about how we can live our best life in every area and on every level. It's maximizing our potential. And what we're going to talk about this evening is going to embody some of the concepts and understanding that comes from that, being in laying out a framework of health from a broader, a deeper, and a more refreshing perspective. And when people ask me what I do now, it falls under the heading of what you can call the theology of science, which essentially is understanding scientific discovery as a revelation of divine order. And that has been an evolution of my 25 years of clinical practice and about 40 years of spiritual seeking and working in traditional Christian ministry for a period of time. And it has evolved to the whole living concept that I present and that I teach today. It has been my own personal evolution, and it has brought me to a place in my life which now in my mid 60s, I feel like I am now living my best life. I feel like I've reached the best place that I've reached at any time or any point in my life. And my life has been a thrilling journey, not without the ups and downs as we all go through. But I have come to a place where I'm very comfortable and I'm very happy with the way my life is progressing. I am not by any means reached where I intend to. Like all of you who are here on the call, life goes on, and I'm looking to continue to grow, expand, and live my own best life. You're here this evening, perhaps because you were invited to hear about a solution, or maybe you may have come from my Facebook page. And every one of us, we are looking for solutions. We are looking for answers. We are looking for ways of how we can make life better. Ultimately, we all want to enjoy the best quality of life. Now, that may be different for each one of us. You may be here because there is an illness, a sickness, or disease in your body that you want to overcome. Maybe you're here because there's financial issues in your life and you want to see if there's any solutions to that. Perhaps you're here because of relationship issues, maybe it in your home with your kids, your spouse, on the job. Maybe you just want to improve yourself, your character. Maybe you struggle with things like discipline and motivation, making better choices in life, and so on. Whatever your priority may be, what I'm going to present to you is really a solution to any and everything that we are dealing in life. And that's why I want to encourage you to listen carefully and connect the dots as we go through, because it's going to follow a stream of thinking and understanding that really presents to us a formula of how we can truly live our best life. And that really is despite what issues we may have or may be facing. What I'm also going to introduce and talk to you about is a technology which is quite extraordinary. And it's a simple, elegant pattern that really refines mind body synergy. And it really unlocks the body's regenerative intelligence through the power of touch. This is a technology that does not require any external type of devices. It has no medicines, no ingredients, no supplements, nothing that's added to it. but once it touches your skin, it does remarkable things. The reason why I want to share it with you is because I've incorporated it into my work, and you'd get a better understanding and appreciation for that later on, and you see how they connect. Our topic always is under the heading of Restore Your Health, Awaken Your Life. And the it's not just a topic, it really is actually a formula that if we can restore our health, we truly will awaken our lives. And by awakening our lives, I'm referring to um, coming to a place where we are living more consciously aware, where we are living more intentional, and where we are determining the quality of our own lives, where we take that personal authority of our lives and we can, in fact, as we'll get to see, create the reality that we so desire. And it is well within our capacity to do that. It's just that most of us, not understanding, we generally don't really step into that. And to restore our health would suggest that health is something that maybe it's diminished, maybe it's deficient, it's broken, and it needs to be restored. And that really is the case with the majority of us on this planet. And this is looking at health in a broader and wider context. And I'm going to begin by looking at the World Health Organization definition of health, which you see on the screen. And it says that health is a state of complete physical, mental, spiritual, and social well being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And so, as we journey into this presentation, the first thing that I would like us to be able to put aside is that health is not about how our body feels and how it functions. That's just a small element of it. So, it's not about the absence of disease or infirmity, although when we live truly healthy, that's where we will get to, but it really is a state of being. And that state is a state that is complete. And so when we think of health, it is really a complete alignment of our physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being. And when we get to understand how these are inseparably interconnected, we will also come to the understanding that this is a foundational equation for living effectively. And so, if we can restore our health, indeed, we are going to awaken our lives and we are going to be able to live at a level of fulfillment that it is perhaps, if I were to completely lay it out, it may seem beyond our imagination. But we have capacities far greater than we recognize or is really taught to us. And so we're going to break this down and we're going to open this up to give us a better understanding of how this formula we call health works. So we're no longer are we going to be thinking of health in the context of physical well-being, because it really is a state of complete alignment. It is a state of being that encompasses every dimension of our lives and extends into the social framework of life. So is this something that really needs restoring? Well, let's take a look at it as we break it down a little bit further. A loss of health is equals a global human struggle. And this really is true. Now, we can do our research and we can see the statistics across the board from all the global authorities that indeed humankind, we are struggling in life. And it is very interesting that we are at a time in history that we are advancing in technology. We are growing in knowledge and understanding and know-how, but at a time where we are at our best in terms of knowledge and technology, we're also at a time where human struggle and suffering is actually escalating, and it's across the board. So when we take that definition of health and we break it down, the first block, our physical, mental, and spiritual well-being, which pertains to our own personal well-being, when that is not in alignment, we are seeing that the statistics are telling us that chronic lifestyle diseases is at an all-time high. And the World Health Organization says in the coming decade it's going to get worse. There is nothing that takes life more on our planet than chronic lifestyle diseases. Not wars and violence combined together. It doesn't do that. Over 50 million people a year die from chronic lifestyle diseases. Now the ages are getting younger. When it comes to mental illnesses, it's now the leading cause of disability worldwide. Healthcare costs are escalating. And spiritual well being is becoming more and more obscure. People are lacking value and purpose and meaning in life. There's this deepening distortion of our identity, of who we really are, and a really increasing divergent understanding as it relates to God. And so our own personal well-being, physically, mentally, and spiritually, many of us it's fragmented. And if that is fragmented, we in our own personal selves, it is going to extend into the social framework. And we're seeing socially, when it comes to relationships, our interactions with others in every area of life, the statistics reveal to us that there's increasing family conflicts and social polarizations, cultural fragmentation, a loss of authentic expressions among people. There is more global tensions and in every area, we're seeing that socially things are becoming more tense. And that really is an extension of the very first block being out of alignment and out of balance. This is why the scriptures will say that um, the loving others as we love ourselves is an inseparable equation. So if we are fragmented in the first block, it is going to affect the second block within the social framework. And the last block of the economic or financial struggles which we're all facing, and when we look at the statistics read almost identical to the ones that deals with sickness and disease. And so today, most people, we are struggling economically, financially. Most people are living in debt, are living paycheck to paycheck. They we have, as they say, more months than money. And even on a global scale, the global debt is increasing. And so when we take a picture about from our very own lives and we extend it onto a global scale, we're seeing that human struggle, despite where we are and how we have advanced to, is still happening and it's increasing. This is why I consider what I'm doing and what I share with people to be very important and to be very critical and even urgent. And so this is an equation here. If we want to improve our economic situation, we want to improve financially, yes, we can go to a financial advisor, we can get advice, we can get counsel there, and we can get some direction and guidance, and it's going to help us, I'm sure, in various ways. But many of us, we keep cycling around because it doesn't start here. This is not the issue, this is the outcome. When it comes to our social issues, our relationships in whatever area of life, we may seek counsel here and we can get help, and it is beneficial, and these are things that we do need to do. But we find that we also struggle to be able to follow through, to maintain, and to bring it to a place where it becomes second nature and our life genuinely becomes changed and transformed to where our relationships are where we want them. And the reason for that is that the first block, our physical, mental, and spiritual well being, if that is not intact, if that is not in alignment, it is going to reflect within the social framework and it's going to follow all the way through. And so, if we want to really rise above where we are, we want to have a better life, we have to become better people in how we engage life. And so, this is an understanding that requires, I know, a lot more than the framework that we're giving it now. And that's why we have upcoming workshops where we get further into it and we break it down. And we invite you, if you have an interest, to attend our workshops. They're free, where we can understand more about this. But all of our struggles, regardless of which block they may fall in, they're not separate issues. They're all just different expressions arising from one thing, a fractured state of being. Our state of being, health is what? Health is a state of complete physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being. And an equation that once it's aligned right, it really fixes all the other areas in our lives. We just have to understand how that works. And so let me just give you a framework to really get an understanding of it. And this is just a framework of it. We go further into when we get into our workshops. So just take a look at ourselves, which represents the first block, the physical, mental, and the spiritual. This is you, this is me. And we're talking about you, your mind, and your body. Now, our true essence of being is spiritual. Our mind is really the bridge between who we are at our core and our external world, the world and the environment around us, which is really connected to an experience through our body. Our body is the instrument through which life is expressed in the world as living or through living. And so life really comes from the inside out, and through the engagement of living, it is expressed that way. I'm just simplifying it. So true health really is spirit, mind, and body resonating in accord as one. This is the natural flow from inside out. And so just stay with me and follow with me, because this will bring us to a place where we want to be able to rise above just superficial solutions that don't have sustainability. So spiritual life, because life is a spiritual unfolding, because we are at our core spiritual beings. But spiritual life, which is aligned with truth and divine law, it flows from invisible into visible, guiding and creating all that we may experience through consciousness. Life begins and it flows through our being as consciousness. That I know needs to be gone into a little bit deeper to understand, but just take that for what it is now. The mind, the bridge, it processes consciousness as awareness, and it interprets thoughts and beliefs into experience through our central nervous system. That's the bridge between the mind and the body. The body now reflects that inner state according to how the mind is oriented. The mind is the bridge between you and the outer world. So remember that. So how the mind is oriented, if our mind is oriented is oriented by our true essence of being, our divine nature, our spiritual nature, we live according to an inner reality that is defined by love, reflected as wholeness. And when the mind interprets thoughts and creates an experience from this dimension, it is unlike anything that the average human generally experience. This is not something that can be known intellectually. It can only be known experientially. This is looking at life through a perception of understanding that is shaped by qualities that are defined by truth and divine law, that when the mind interprets it through that lens, our experience of life is one that is governed and defined by peace and joy and everything that is positive without effort. I am not talking about trying to rise above circumstances of life to try and feel a sense of peace or joy or compassion or gratitude. I'm talking about we're living in a state of being where we don't know anything else but that. We are aware of the other side, but experientially, it does not touch us. Of course, that is something that has to be experienced. If, on the other hand, our mind is oriented towards our physical nature, the outer reality becomes what defines our reality. And once the mind, conditioned through the five senses or socially conditioned by our upbringing and everything that goes on in our culture and media, etc., when the mind is conditioned through that physical realm, and we based our reality, or we interpret life from that side, we only know separation, not wholeness. Separation becomes our natural orientation. It always becomes an us or a them, a win or a lose. It always becomes a good and a bad. There's always a separation. When life flows from the other side that we just mentioned, there is no conceptual or experiential awareness or the experience of that separation. Anyway, let's not get into that. I just want us to get the framework of how it works. Now, if we want to really get a handle on living our best life, we have to be aware of this framework. Restoring our health and awakening our life requires that our mind, which is the bridge between our true essence of being, which we rarely touch, we do experience it periodically, but our general well-being is defined by external reality, not internal essence, because we are not that way conditioned. In fact, those of us that are trying to get back to our true essence of being, we are often trying to do it while still oriented externally. And it makes it a struggle to get back. And so our whole journey of life, it begins with thoughts, what transpires in the mind, and thoughts emerge from one or two sources, either spiritual signals that come from consciousness, our spiritual essence, or from sensory stimuli from our subconscious. The source of our thoughts determine the quality of our thoughts. If it's an inner source, which is intuitive or inspired, it's more positive and it's more harmonious and it's more aligned with things that foster unity, wholeness, oneness, balance, peace, creativity, etc. When it's an outer source, it is conditioned by our experience and our memory. Now, here's the thing. Thoughts arise. 70% of what we think in a day, it's not conscious, it is unconscious. We only engage 5% of conscious thinking, which is when we have to make decisions or rationalize things. Outside of that, 95% of what's transpiring in our minds is happening automatically without us. So thinking happens. Very little do we consciously engage thinking. Most of it, thinking just happens. Where those thoughts are arising from is one of these two sources. Now, thoughts are now filtered through perception, and perception is how we are socially conditioned, our beliefs and our values that shape our mindsets and our sense of identity. And this is where we really have to get a handle on, because when thoughts arise, our perception interprets these thoughts into experience as emotions. Why is this important? Because experience is the very fabric that gives meaning and value to our living. If there's no experience, then there is no living, there's no life. We can be comatose in a home and we have no experience because there's no emotion. Emotion is the signature of experience. So we have thoughts, and the thoughts are then interpreted by our mindsets and perceptions, and it's interpreted as experience, as emotions. So our emotions is what defines our experience. Why is that important? Because emotions are energies in motions. They are embodied waves of energy that signal our inner state. And you're going to get this. They are the language of the body revealing either alignment or misalignment, wellness or illness, and it marks the point where our inner state is going to shape the choices we make. So, in other words, where we are today in our lives, wherever we may be, and wherever we may hope to be, is going to always come down to the choices that we are making moment by moment, every single day of life, every choice and every decision that we are going to make, whether it be in our best interest or not, every choice is going to be determined by our state, defined by an emotion that came from a thought that was interpreted by our perception or our view of reality that is shaped by how our minds have been conditioned, either externally by social conditioning or internally by deeper values of truth and divine law. However, our minds are set, whatever that setting may be, becomes the lens through which thoughts are filtered through and interpreted as what gives meaning, value to life as emotions. That now brings us to a point of how we choose. So you see, it's very important that as we engage life and we work towards living our best life, and we work towards this is about us overcoming uh, superficial solutions that we may have tried before. It's not enough to say you need to make better choices. If you don't know how you're making your choices, if you don't understand how it arises, it's not enough to say we need to be more disciplined. You need to be motivated. You need to be consistent. You need to not procrastinate. You need to not engage in self-defeating behavior. It's not enough to say that. You need to understand why it is we do it, how it arises, if we are truly going to overcome it. And so what we get from this is that thoughts will arise. And those thoughts are going to be interpreted by our perception, how we view reality, which is a reflection of our mindsets and how we have been shaped, how the mind has been set based on the beliefs and values it has accepted based on where we are rooted. And here's a way that we can probably understand it a little clearer. A tree is known by its fruit. So if we look at this analogy, think of this soil as the nature by which we live, either our spiritual nature or our physical nature. And when I say spiritual nature, I am not speaking about religious doctrines and rules to follow. I'm talking about our spiritual nature being the essence of what is truth. And of course, that's defined in our workshops. And I'm talking about the part of our being that allows us to access a realm of reality beyond our physical senses that gives us sovereignty and governance over our lives. Something that most people are not aware of because we don't live at that level. So this soil is which nature we choose to anchor our roots in. Our roots are the state of being that arises out of that soil, and the trunk is the extension of the roots, which is our mind that filters the human experience, and the branches are the different dimensions of our lives, different aspects of our lives. And the branches bear the fruit. And the fruit are the emotions that ripen into behavior and choices that will determine ultimately our quality of life. And so you see, wherever we anchor our sense of identity, whichever soil and it's going to be either one or the other. You cannot mix them. You will be dominant on one or the other. But whichever one we are rooted in is going to determine our state of being, which is going to determine our state of mind, which is going to determine how we interpret the reality of life and the reality we create. This is what's going to determine what we attract into our lives and how we engage living on what level. Because the fruit that is born will determine how we are going to engage with life, the choices we're going to make, how effective we're going to be, whether we're going to persevere or whether we're going to quit, whether we're going to have vision, purpose, whether we're going to live with what level of meaning and value. This is the equation of how we get the first block in alignment so it then passes through. When we understand that we don't experience life as it is, we experience life as we are, which is why you can have two people look at a half full glass. One sees it half full, the other sees it half empty. We determine what reality is for us. One person gets cut off on the highway and flies into a rage. Another person gets cut off on the highway and they go into a place of compassion where they feel that person is in such a hurry. I hope they get to where they're going. I hope they're safe. Two completely different responses to the same reality. Life will present us with events. People will say things, people will do things, and circumstances will arise. They are neutral. They are not good or bad or whatever. It is how we interpret it based on how our minds are set that creates the lens through which we look based on where our life is rooted. And that is where, if you really want to rise above and you want to have life better, you want a better life, it's not about changing circumstances. It's not about changing your job and changing the people around you. It's about changing yourself. You want a better life? Become your best. Become your best, and you will begin to live your best. Now, becoming our best means becoming aligned physically, mentally, and spiritually. The rule of life is life flows from the inside out. It flows from invisible to visible. It is the structure of creation. Creation is expanding all the time. Creation is not just a closed event. Everything continues to expand. All of creation, the universe continues to expand, and it happens from the inside out. Sickness happens from the inside out. Healing happens from the inside out. Life flows from the inside out. That is the rule of life. And so it's not that we are living from the outside in. It is more that our mind, which is doing the interpretation and filtering life, has been conditioned by values of the outside. And so we are living from the inside out based on external values rather than the internal values and flowing with the natural flow. So we end up we're like paddling upstream. We're going against the flow. And so life is always a struggle. There is no such thing in reality as they hurt my feelings. They get me vexed. Nobody does anything. We interpret it that way because of how our life is rooted. This is the essential formula. In our workshops, we take it from the beginning and we break it down and we bring it into practical steps of engagement so we can live more effectively. And what happens as we journey into this is that life becomes a flow of enrichment and enjoyment and evolves to fulfillment. And we get to a point as we engage it where it doesn't matter what goes on around us. It doesn't have to knock us upside down as we begin, but it all comes down to what? Our state of mind, which is determined by our state of being. And so we are meant to live and grow fruitfully and thrive naturally. These 6 dimensions of our lives, what we call the wholeness of health, That's our natural state. We are naturally whole. We don't have to figure out how to be whole. It is our natural state. We're just not aware of it. That's all. And whatever we are not aware of doesn't exist. We're not aware that our true essence is, and we really lack nothing. So to truly experience a healthy life means that we have to take sovereignty or personal authority over every dimension of our life. This is important because we have been when our mind is conditioned externally, we have a view, a way of living where we place blame and we place responsibilities elsewhere for how life is or isn't or turning out. And that's really not the case. This is important because this is not a separate, when we say life is whole, it means it's complete. Complete meaning that everything is in order, nothing is missing, and everything is in its order. When it starts to go out of order, which is our responsibility and not what's happening in the world, we will be surprised to know that we are the ones that affect and determine what our reality will be when we truly get an understanding of this, because the capacity that we have is way beyond what we really know. So when one dimension of our life goes out, it affects the rest, because you have to think of it, it's whole. If something is broken, the whole structure is affected. It's like a six-spoke wheel. If one spoke becomes deficient, the whole wheel is going to start to wobble. You want to get your financial affairs in order. You want to get a clearer way of thinking. You want to be physically strong. You want to be more spiritually aligned. You want to have better relationships. So it's good. We need to start wherever may be our priority, but the process of how we engage it must always be holistic. You see? So sovereignty, or taking that personal responsibility, it is rooted in this awakened identity, understanding our true essence of being and who we really are. Why? Because our potential, what we are capable of doing, our potential is relative to our identity. We would never truly know what we are capable of if we don't truly know who we are. And however we perceive ourselves, to that degree will we perceive our potential. We cannot live beyond our identity. We cannot live greater than how we perceive ourselves, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And it's important because most people that I deal with, we are struggling to find out purpose and meaning in life. And we're surprised to know that you don't have to be looking out there for purpose. It's already within us. Purpose will naturally arise when the alignment starts coming into place, and we will understand how that works. But that's what gives life its meaning, its power, and its value. That's what gives us the power to persevere and move. But our purpose is relative to our potential, and our potential is relative to our identity. And based on where our identity is rooted, will determine what we see, how we perceive, and how we interpret the reality around us. But for us to reign in life, which is our birthright, we need a perspective that is shaped by a mindset that's rooted in self-love, in truth, and divine order. And self-love is perhaps one of the biggest deficiencies on this planet, which is why there's so many relational issues escalating on our planet. Because the simple equation is you cannot extend love and the qualities of that externally if it does not exist for self. We can't. That's why love your neighbor as yourself is an inseparable equation. This is perhaps one of the biggest, if not the biggest deficiency that we have, and we're not aware of it because we say we love ourselves, we want to love ourselves, and we're trying to love ourselves. But if we really examine our lifestyle, our behaviors, physically, mentally, and spiritually, we will see that it is really questionable how much we really truly do. But this is the framework that we need in order to cultivate this wholeness of health. So we understand that when we become disconnected from that inner, our core, our essence of our true nature, there is we're dealing with life and how that inner life and the power of that flows between the bridge, our mind, which is where the renewal needs to take place, and our outer world, our body. The mind is the central axis on how living is expressed and experienced. This is the gateway for creating our reality. And so we need to be able to get a handle on our minds. So when I work with some people and we talk about renewing the mind, people find this to be a very big struggle. People cannot focus long enough, maintain attention long enough, stay committed to things long enough, because, and the generation that we are in today with social media and technology is teaching us more and more to train our minds to be scattered even more. So we pick up our smartphones and we jump from one thing to the next, and we forgot why we picked up our phone in the first place. That's how our minds are being trained today, to where it is becoming even more scattered. So when our mental state, and this is what we have to work for, when our mental state is at peace, which is the natural state of alignment, the brain, which is the hardware that processes mind, brain is the hardware that processes it all. That functions optimally when our mind is in a state of peace. And it enables performance of all of our cognitive functions and all of our biological process to be optimal. This is something that most of us, most people don't get to fully experience. We are all at different levels of how we might engage this. Science and neuroscience tells us that we only use 10 to 15% of our cognitive capacity. 85% of our cognitive capacity is untapped. And do you know why? This is scientifically validated. In neuroscience, most of our cognitive capacity is untapped because of how our minds are oriented. Because our natural state of pure consciousness from spirit, the more we engage that, the more we begin to access more of our cerebral capacity and creativity that extends into abilities that we can do things that otherwise we would think might be impossible. But we want to get back to this place of a mental state that is governed by peace. There is nothing in this world more valuable than a state of inner peace. Nothing more valuable than that. Because once we accomplish this, that is the umpire or the gauge of inner alignment. Once we have this inner alignment, it extends out into how we affect and how we engage with living. Because peace is that natural state of wholeness. When our thoughts and our emotional responses are out of sync with peace, this creates a fracture in our inner state. Is a dissonance, a disharmony is created. And it is this inner disharmony which arises because of a conflict between our natural state and who we are socially conditioned to be. This is the essence of where our issue really is. And this produces an unstable state of mind where we are interpreting reality, interpreting our thoughts, and responding to life in ways conditioned by this that does not optimally serve our interests, but we don't know anything else because this is how we have been conditioned. From a child, we have been conditioned, and this is the reality. So there is a process of unlearning and relearning in renewing the mind, but renewing the mind is a process of rewiring the brain to be able to process things differently. And so it's a journey. But here's what I want to get to, and it's this. When we have this dissonance or disharmony in our inner being, our state of being is unstable, is an unstable state of mind. This is the root of stress. Now, many people don't go here. When we think about stress and we talk about stress, we are making reference to things external to us. Again, because our minds are that way oriented. So we think it is the circumstances of life, and we think it is the financial issues and the bills, and we think it is, the job and the folks we have to deal with and the traffic we have to contend with, and life is stressful. It is not. It is just how we are interpreting it. But the root of stress, which is very critical because stress has become a global epidemic, affecting lives across, and now we are treating stress like it is another chronic disease. And now we're taking medications for stress that's now creating secondary and tertiary problems. And we're not getting to the root of our problems. And this is important because stress, which arises out of this identity crisis that creates this inner dissonance, it creates a fractured way of living. And I want us to understand that this inner state that we're talking about really, which is where the root, it is the seedbed from where stress springs. If we don't deal with it correctly based on what we're talking about, stress is inevitable. And why is it important? Because stress destroys pretty much everything. Why? Because it's opposite to our natural state, which is wholeness. It is foreign to us, but is what we know. We don't know another way because we've been so conditioned. And which is why we engage in the work that we are doing and in the workshops to help us to turn this around, to get right back into the natural flow of things. And so this is how this fractured way of living presents itself. These are just some ways that we might be able to relate with. Privately, experiencing life one way, but publicly pretending life is another. It's projecting self-confidence while still disturbed by what others think about us. Do we live to impress people, or do we live to have an impact in life? Is it about, wanting to be seen rather than being an example, judging others for improper behaviors while we justify our own, proclaiming to value the truth yet not be honest with ourselves first and foremost, and with others? And we would do it in small ways that we think is insignificant, but we don't know that every time we violate truth, we create a fracture. It's desiring to be healthy, but yet willfully engaging in unhealthy habits. It's resolving to change or improve or do things differently, but yet we don't follow through. It's thinking one thing, but saying another, feeling one way, but doing another. It is when our well-being is defined by the circumstances around us. We feel good when everything is going good. We feel at peace, which is not that deep inner peace that transcends human intellect and understanding. Not that type of peace, because we rarely touch that type of peace. But it's feeling contented when life is going good. It's feeling loved when people love us. It's feeling good, but in other words, around us must be going the way we prefer for us to feel good and value ourselves. But the minute things are not going the way we think, our sense of well-being starts to change. So understand that stress does not arise from external circumstances of life, but how we interpret and react to them, shaped by our internal framework of our mindsets, which arises out of an unstable sense of self. Scriptures call this being double-minded. This affects the way we choose, make decisions, interact with people. It affects every level of how we live. But this is talking about the first block, the alignment of physical, mental, and spiritual well-being being out of alignment. It presents this way, and this is, so like we call stress, life is stressful. That's because there is this fracture in there. And it's important to get a handle of it because the authorities all over the world tell us the same thing, that stress is the number one driver of physical and mental dysfunction. And that's important because when physically and mentally things start to go wrong, it doesn't matter what you have, what you own, or how much money you have. Not everything takes a back seat when we start to lose our capacity to live pain-free and to live effectively and express life the way we want to express life through a strong body. 60 to 80% of people in modern societies live in a chronic and recurrent state of stress. Up to 90% of doctors' visits are stress related. Stress is the basic cause of 75 to 90% of all human illness and disease. Over 90% of disease is caused by stress, thoughts, and beliefs. That's epigenetic studies. Chronic stress increases the odds of developing Alzheimer's by 145%. And this is just the surface of it. And this is how most of us are living in this state. And it creates all kinds of issues. The central nervous system, the bridge between mind and body, is how experience becomes illness. And this is important because this is where, when we start to put the pieces back together to bring the alignment, it requires an inner and an outer engagement, which has precedence right here in our physical well-being. So, for example, if I say to someone, and when I was in the clinic, over the years, one of the hardest things for people to do is change what they feed their bodies, to change their diets, to start to engage more in healthy habits because of, again, how our mind is oriented. But let's understand how this works. And I'm going to try and simplify something that's very complex. The central nervous system extends into what we know as the autonomic nervous system, which controls all physiological functions in our bodies, right down to the cellular level. And it has two branches. The first branch, the sympathetic nervous system, deals with stress response. This stress response is when we're fearful and angry and have resentment and we have shame and guilt and we're upset and we're frustrated, and it's all the negative energies. Where are these coming from? Not outside. They are arising from inside, from how we are interpreting what we think about whatever life is presenting us with. But all the medical literature and all the different branches of science all collaborate and all in agreement that chronic stress is the seedbed from which all chronic illness will spring. And in some of our workshops, we get more into those details as well. But it promotes the oxidation and the chronic inflammation, which is needed for the process of illness even to begin. And this is, we live in sympathetic dominance in our nervous system almost constantly. Some research says even while we're sleeping, sympathetic dominance sometimes is still running. In other words, we are living, this is what they call the fight-flight response. This is the survival, living in a survival mode. We live in survival mode almost constantly. And this is not just the emotional state. This is also thoughts, what we think. Research tells us that thinking thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I'm no good. Just negative self-talk activates sympathetic dominance in our bodies. Just a low sense of worth activates sympathetic dominance. Not feeling good about who you are, not feeling good about how you look, you're activating sympathetic dominance. Any type of negative frequency. Remember, every thought and emotion, they're energetic. They're actually energetic frequencies. It activates sympathetic dominance. And most of the world lives with this activated and in overdrive all the time based on neuroscience. 70% of the time we're living it like that. The second arm, or the second branch of it, is the parasympathetic system, and this one deals with healing and recovery. This is the one that stays dominant when there is that inner state of peace and balance and harmony, when there is coherence between mind and body, when we are in that state of homeostasis. Research shows that the immune system can upregulate by hundreds of percent in a matter of minutes if we can get into this state of inner balance and harmony. We have seen through the studies in things like meditation how the immune factors upregulate quickly, just bringing our state of being into where our nervous system comes into this natural state of balance. And this is where our body works more efficiently, our mind, our creativity, our cognition, everything becomes more efficient. We tap into systems, we tap into capacities that are normally inaccessible when we are in sympathetic dominance. Now, the central nervous system is regulated by our state of mind. Our state of mind is going to be governed by our state of being, which is depending on how our minds are set based on where we are rooted, what soil our sense of self or identity is rooted in. We understand that. But our state of mind is what determines how balanced our central nervous system is, which is going to determine how efficient the body works and how efficient the mind, regulated and balanced, these things work. It's measured by brainwave activity. And so neuroscience has shown us that when brainwaves reflect in a harmony, which is defined by positive frequencies, positive waves, love, peace, joy, gratitude, compassion, those states, the nervous system stays in its natural balance where everything functions optimally. When the brain waves reflect an inner dissonance, fear, worry, anxiety, these negative states, it shifts the nervous system into survival mode. That doesn't only start to set a spiral that leads to chronic illness, but it makes accessing our creativity and cognitive abilities, our abilities to interpret life and function, it obscures all of that. And so we're not able to live effectively. But because here's what happens, the brain wires itself to that sympathetic dominance because we live that way continuously. We're supposed to switch into sympathetic dominance if there's an emergency or a crisis, it kicks in and then it settles back down. But our brain becomes wired to it, so it becomes our norm. So a stressful life eventually becomes just the normal way we live. We don't even think or feel anything about it because it has become our normal, which is why renewing the mind requires that we have to rewire the brain from how it has wired to this type of imbalance. And so the solution is that we need to start nurturing a truth-centered life where our physical, mental, emotional, physical well-being needs to be engaged based on correct principles. And there's a process, there's a pathway of how we can work towards that based on what we've been talking about so far. And it brings us to a place of inner alignment. See, inner alignment creates a state of mind that's in harmony, and that synchronizes our brain waves into coherence, and it resets the central nervous system for optimal function. The central nervous system is that bridge between mind and body that determines our mental and cognitive capacity and how well our body feels, functions, regenerates, and how it maintains that. That naturally happens when we start to engage life from the inside out. And so that's the process. But what if, while we are working on this, while we are working on ourselves, while we are realigning, while we are engaging the process, what if there was a way that we could actually bring our brain waves to resemble a state of mind that was already in harmony and balance? What if we could actually do that while we were working on this before we could actually get there? What if we could actually align it and bring it into a state as though we were already arriving there? Well, what would happen is that physiologically, the body's systems will upregulate and start to function more efficiently. We will feel better. We will function better. We can overcome illness more efficiently. Our minds become clearer. We become more emotionally resilient, more mental cognition. If we can bring our brainwaves to resemble that state before we can develop that, which is a process of time, before we can get to that place where our thoughts and our emotions and how we speak and how we act is all one and the same, because we are in alignment. That's what it takes. And so that's a lifelong journey. But what if we can actually align that right now? And that is where this extraordinary technology comes in. Because this is a technology that really unlocks that the regenerative intelligence between mind and body. And it does it without any drugs, any ingredients, any medication, any external frequencies. It does it simply through the power of touch. This is so powerful, this is so profound that in my 25 years of clinical experience working with anything that works at this level, this is a first for me. And the impact that I've seen it have with people who've been suffering with condition for years and how they've been able to change the condition because of being able to bring this type of balance back. Why? Because healing is natural to the human system. Regeneration is natural. The point is that once we can create the right conditions, and that condition is that at the control center, the brain, which is what processes mind and all the aspects of mind, that has to be working in balance and in harmony. It just so happens for most of us, it is not. Our brains usually are quite restless, incoherent, not in harmony and not in balance. This technology helps us to be able to do that. It was discovered and invented by this gentleman here, Jay Dhaliwal, who is a software engineer. And he discovered it while he was trying to develop or find a solution, rather, for his mother's multiple sclerosis. I adopted this technology into my work and into my own life personally because I think it's just absolutely amazing. And I think it's something that personally, I think everyone needs it, whether they know it or not, once they understand the value of this. And so it wasn't because of trying to develop something to introduce into the wellness industry for money. It evolved out of purpose. And what he discovered after 17 years of research and development and untold millions spent in it, he discovered something so simple that taps into the human design. And this is what I really love about it, that it absolutely is completely drug free, which is something the world needs today. He calls it vibro tactile technology. Vibro, speaking of vibration, tactile, which is sense of touch, technology. And so I'm going to show you a brain scan that Superpatch did. Um, Jay Dhaliwal, he's along with one of his VP of clinical strategy, he does an example of a brain scan to show how we can go from a restless state of mind to a more orderly state of mind. And it happens in a matter of really seconds because this technology works almost instantly. And we can just hop over to YouTube and we're going to just take about 2 minutes of a video that's there where he does a scan so you can just get an idea of how this technology works. Then I'm going to come back and bring it down and we'll work our way to a close. So let's just head across to YouTube and look at this video. Computer sound is on. So the technology is based on Nobel Prize research that goes back to the 1930s and 40s, where they discovered that every cell in the human body receives and transmits electromagnetic signals. And that is what led to what we use today in EEGs, MRIs, MEGs. The technology that led to being able to map inside the body is because every cell actually can actually transmit and receive electromagnetic frequencies, which, by the way, is why every cell in our body reads the thoughts and emotions, which are frequencies that we are emitting internally and externally, by the way. Every cell in our body reads the frequencies of our thoughts and emotions. That's something we really should be aware of, but that's another story. So based on that, and then later on in the early 2000s, two other Nobel Prize laureates discovered that the sensory neurons in the skin, we know that anything that touches the skin sends a signal to the brain, which is how we know that anything is even touching us. That the sensory neurons in the skin, they discovered that they're what they call ion channels that's embedded in these sensory neurons that can actually detect the vibration of anything that touches the skin. Not just that's touching it, but the vibrational signature of it. Because everything in nature, everything in the universe has a vibrational signature to it. And that was an interesting discovery because it led to what is superpatch today. So what happens is it's a simple technology, but very profound. And you can think about how a QR code may work. You look at a QR code, and this QR code has information that's embedded in there, which you can't tell. But if you point a camera at it, the camera is going to convert that visual pattern into a digital signal, and it's going to unlock whatever the information is. In a very similar manner, super patches, they just have tactile patterns on them. And what super patch has been able to discover, which is proprietary to them, is that depending on the pattern, it will send a gentle signal to the brain. And they have discovered that how to create patterns to be able to bring various neural networks in the brain back into their natural or original state of balance. And so it's kind of like how a tuning fork would work. So let's say your immune system, which is everything in the body, every function in the body is governed by what goes on in the brain. The brain is the control center for all physiological function. Anything that's not, if your immune system is not functioning optimal, then the neural network in the brain that governs that, it's not properly in sync. So Superpatch, they have a patch for the immune system. It's called Defend. When you stick the patch on, it sends a gentle signal and it goes to the neural network responsible for immunity, brings it back into harmony, and it optimizes now immune function. It brings the immune system back to its original optimal setting, and it does it very quickly. And so, in essence, that's really how it works. So after 17 years of research and development, vibrotactile technology has now become peer-reviewed and published research, and is being published in prestigious journals around the world. In addition to that, the technology is being presented at major global medical research symposiums that have their own peer review board. And so what we have is a very powerful, profound, and validated technology that's verified by science and clinical research. And so we know it's reliable and it's safe. So far, Superpatch has developed 14 different technologies, 14 different patterns that interface with 14 different neural networks or multiple neural networks, some of them that brings the brain into a state of harmony and balance, and it restores that mind-body synergy. And what it does, it optimizes now physiological function and psychological function as well. And so they have for example, not gonna go into detail with all of these now, but the peace patch, which is for stress, the research has shown that When you put the peace patch on, in a matter of minutes, the center of the brain that lights up when a person is in meditation, that part of the brain comes into harmony and balance. So a person that may be feeling stressed and overwhelmed and by stress, and they put the peace patch on, in a matter of moments, they start to feel centered and calm. The one for immunity, for pain, you get a 72% reduction in pain within a matter of 20 minutes. It is amazing that the effect that these things have and how quickly they work. And there's absolutely no substances involved in this. This is the brain which controls everything functioning in a more optimal state, which naturally it unlocks or releases or amplifies or synchronizes the regenerative intelligence, the same thing that built the body and runs the body, that's running it with trillions of functions right now. That's what it's tapping into. And so the one that you saw demonstrated was the Liberty Patch, which is for mobility. If you have issues with your stability, your balance, your range of motion, it's anti-aging, it's anti-inflammatory. All the patches are actually multifunctional. The victory patch is for athletic performance. One of the interesting things about the victory patch, not only does it improve your force, your strength, your power, and your stamina in a matter of seconds, it also improves heart rate variability, which is a very important thing as a key marker of longevity. If you have issues with sleep, mental clarity, and cognition, energy, mood, focus, for healthy skin, metabolism, improved metabolism, habit control, you're struggling with some type of addiction, for masculine function. These are some of the technologies, and the one that they have in research and development now are so they're like beyond the curve of where medicine is today. They're actually decades ahead with what they're going to be coming out in the near future with the technology that they have. Now, this is Superpatch is introducing a new era, a new paradigm of wellness. This is not like anything that has ever existed before. This is, and I want to be able to draw the distinction because as I work with people with the patches, they use them, they see the effects of them, but they still tend to think of them the way how medicine or supplements or herbs and that type of thing will work. And I want to make a distinction about that, and I'll do that in a minute. But these are mind-body solutions that we all need. They're FDA registered. They have a high efficacy rate. They're non-invasive. They're completely safe. If you have a child that is 2 years old that has a flu or has an allergy response, you can use it and it's going to you'll see how quickly they work. There are no contraindications, regardless of what medication you may be, or if you have medically implanted devices. None of those things matter because it's actually not introducing anything into your body. It takes a little while to grasp the understanding of this because our minds naturally default to thinking about this like how medicine or herbs or supplements would work. And it has a completely different mode of action of how it functions, even though we just went through that demonstration. So just to give you an idea of the difference of this technology, how unique the difference is, so you can put it into, get the right perception of it. There are two principles that we need for optimal wellness, balance, and performance. This is physically and psychologically. There are two principal things that we need. One, we need raw materials. This is all external. So whether it's nutrition, this includes your medicines, your herbs, your supplements, all external. These are the resources. This is the fuel. This is the raw materials that provides the energy, the balance, the growth, regeneration. This is the raw materials that we need. They all come from all externally. Then the other thing that we need is functionality, optimal function. This is a creative intelligence that's woven in to the structure that enlivens an operating system, which guides how efficiently all the raw materials are utilized. The raw materials that we take in and of themselves can do nothing without the operating system. The operating system is not driven by any of these raw materials. It's driven by a innate intelligence. It is what took the first cell in the body. It's woven into the very structure. Medicine doesn't understand it because it's not physical. But how that first cell was even formed and the intelligence that it has to be able to transpose itself into two, into four, and exponentially into trillions, and how it's able right now to keep running itself, and how there are trillions of cells performing millions of functions each. How is what's orchestrating all of this and doing it in a state of harmony and balance? It is that creative intelligence that if you stop that, none of the raw materials can work. In fact, if you stop that, that means you're dead, really. But I'm just drawing a reference that the raw materials which we take, which is anything we can take externally, which we need, and the two of them work together. The raw materials can actually disrupt function depending on the quality of the raw materials. But the function itself, which is a system, as an operating system that's woven into and governed by neurology. It's governed by what comes from the brain and the central nervous system. That functionality, which is a built in to the system, that is what Superpatch taps into. Superpatch cannot be compared with a medicine, a herb, or something because it is not anything to do with resources that you need for functionality. It is pure functionality in and of itself. In fact, super patches doesn't only optimize functionality, but if the raw materials are lacking and limited, super patch maximizes the limitations of those and enhances how the body still functions. Of course, the ideal situation is you need to have them both. You need to have quality materials and you have to have optimal functionality. So I'm saying that just to draw the distinction, now what's the difference between super patch? People ask me, what's the difference between taking this and taking some other supplement? It's a completely different thing. This is not material that the body now has to process and utilize in whatever way. But what determines how it is processed and how it is utilized is that regenerative or creative intelligence that's woven into the system. It is an energetic system. It comes from consciousness, really. Well, don't want to get straight up into that, but that is what Superpatch taps into, the very core of functionality. So it's not part of the raw material at all. When you take super patches and you combine them together, you're now creating a broader base of efficacy where our inner state of mind and being begins to get even greater. You're now becoming more proactive, more protective, and more preventive. You're not just optimizing function, you're now addressing the rate at which we're aging. So we're looking at longevity. We're looking at reducing our risk. And so we're talking about a flow of balance and vitality and elevated well-being, physically and psychologically, that you cannot get from any external raw material, regardless of what it is. Now, there are raw materials, herbs and supplements and different things we can take that are natural that helps our bodies in this way. And if you're using Super Patch, then it even takes it even to a much higher level. And so, just to conclude, we're talking about unlocking that potential within through the power of touch. And so, these are safe, wearable, non invasive, haptic technology that's designed to optimize brainwave entrainment. Why is that important? Because it supports neuroplasticity. This is key because neuroplasticity is how the brain rewires itself to the new balance. So, the brain is always rewiring itself. It's either going to rewire itself and adapt to what is bad or adapt to what is good based on what is being fed into it. So when you wear super patches consistently over time, that new balance that's being entrained, the brain begins to gradually rewire itself to the new balance. That's important because that you're talking about sustainability. So the skin delivers these very specific neural signals that gently guide the brain into healthier states. And the signals sync with the regenerative intelligence of the body's operating system, which is the brain, and it enhances that mind-body synergy. External material can't do this. The signaling creates an optimal environment for very rapid neurological alignment, and it makes shifting mindsets more natural and accessible. When we work with people, and when you work with yourself in trying to shift mindsets, you're going to see, because of the restlessness of our minds, how difficult it is, even to just you go and sit down and spend time in quiet prayer. You'll see how difficult it is just to keep your mind in one place. But when our mind starts to become more orderly, shifting mindsets now become even more accessible. So the work, that inner work of inner alignment, where we can improve every dimension of our life, which is what we want to work towards, it becomes easier and accessible when we start to use this technology. So super patches, they work like updating the body's operating system before we can run the new transformational apps, which are the practices that we want to engage to renew the mind. But before we can run those apps, when you use super patches, it upgrades the operating system just like your phone so that the apps can run a whole lot more efficiently. We have a scientific or medical advisory board that oversees compliance and the utilization, particularly in real world testing and application, to make sure that the technology is compliant and utilized correctly, etc. And so, very simple to use. Um, you can pretty much put it anywhere on your body. Each patch works on signals for 24 hours. They eventually begin because of body temperature, oils in the skin, perspiration, different things. The pattern that it has in it begins to gradually erode, and so the signaling begins to fade. And so you change the patches out every 24 hours. And so my invitation to you is to become part of our community. Our community, this community, we work and we are about to engage a series of workshops where we work through what we talked about in the beginning about getting aligned. And so, but part of that alignment is being able to get our brains functioning more coherently, that mind body synergy, which makes the whole process more accessible. And so, my invitation is to you is whether you were invited by one of the members of our community, whether you came from one of the social media adverts, wherever, that the patches are easily accessible, and it doesn't matter wherever you are in the world, they're accessible. We have a Facebook page that has literally thousands of testimonies of how these patches are impacting people's lives all around the world. My invitation to you is to consider joining our community and work and join us in working on building our lives, getting more aligned, looking, and part of it is this self-care solution. What I've also done is that I know what we went through as some of it might be unfamiliar to a lot of people. So what I've put inside of the chat is a document that you can download. It's a 3 or 4 page document that outlines all that we have been through. It is a document that you can use as a resource of reference for what we talked about tonight in terms of looking at health as a formula for optimizing effective living. And so you could download that resource from the chat. You can go through that and use that as a reference to help. Or you could also request a copy of the recording of this session so you can go through it. But we don't just want to give you this information and then you go your way. We want this to be meaningful, and we want it to be able to impact our lives in a positive way. So since the mind is the axis for life experiences, then super patches are our strategic support towards living our best life. It's not just about our bodies feeling better, functioning better, and overcoming physical challenges. it's also about our minds working better and bringing that alignment so that we can engage a process of true inner transformation. And so, an easy way to get the technologies to become a member of our community, it's a one-time cost of $40, which gives you access to wholesale pricing. And so that $175 you see there includes that one-time $40 membership, and it gives you four of the technologies. You you order four, you pay for three, and you get one free. And that's the simplest way that you could become part of the community. The three that I have there is not the three that you have to get. It could be any four that you so choose. I just happen to put the three that are foundational, that brings mind-body synergy. It coordinates all our biological systems, upregulates immunity, and it brings that overall functionality to mind and body. But it could be any four that you so choose. So I want to encourage you and I want to invite you to consider this as a very affordable thing to do for us to engage that. Once you're a member of the community, you have the option to become an entrepreneur with us. This may be for some people, it may not be for some, but it affords you to be able to own a unique, globally scalable business that's based on the principles of compound growth, and is where you can actually build your own personal economy based on at your own pace. There is no pressure about anything, but it is a very unique economic model. And I know most of the people I work with, everybody is looking to increase their financial position. This is one that has meaning, it's very rewarding, it has value to your life. You become part of the community where you're not just building your own personal well-being, but you're also going to help others to be able to do the same. If you happen to have an interest in that, or just wanted to become a member of the community to access the technology where you can work on your own life, you can scan this QR code and it gives you a link to our Zoom session, which is tomorrow evening at 6:30. And that Zoom session where we go into um, the options that you have uh, to become part of the community, how the entrepreneurial program works, and if you have an interest in that. And that session is a little bit more interactive, where you're going to have an opportunity to be able to ask questions, and whether it be questions about this evening or about the technology or about the economic model. Either way, you can do that. So I want to say thank you to everyone for investing your time. Please download the resource that I put into the chat. It is going to be a useful resource for you to go over to reference what we talked about in looking at health as a formula, a model for how we can get more aligned in our lives and live more effectively in every area and on every level. And you can also consider the technology as another resource to help us in that process of alignment. So I look forward to seeing those of you who have an interest in joining the community at the session tomorrow evening. You can also reach out to the partners who might have invited you on the call, and they may be able to answer further questions for you. So with that, I want to say good night, and I want to say thank you. Have a wonderful week ahead of you, and may God bless each and all of you.